Hello, beloveds, and welcome to Christian Emotional Recovery, a podcast for those who are survivors of childhood trauma, emotional neglect, and narcissistic abuse. This podcast is hosted by Rachel Leroy, a college professor and trauma survivor. Many of us spend years trying to heal and don't get anywhere. We don't always target the trauma itself, which is so often what keeps us stuck. This podcast is where faith meets science. Rachel is an emotional healing expert with 20 years of experience applying healing modalities that helped her start making progress after nothing else worked. She'll show you how to do the same. Each week, we'll cover a topic that will show you how to heal trauma for good. Please check out our website and show notes at christianemotionalrecovery.com and join the Facebook community, Trauma Survivors Unite, Christian Emotional Recovery.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Christian Emotional Recovery. I'm your host, Rachel Leroy, and this is Season 2, Episode 17. And this episode is a repurposed episode from a couple of my YouTube videos that come out bi-weekly, every 2 weeks. So while most of the content on the podcast is original material and most of the content on the YouTube channel is original material, I do repurpose some YouTube videos to save time and also so I can make people who are on the podcast aware of the original material I have on the YouTube channel. So if you haven't, go over to the YouTube channel. There's a link in the show notes below and subscribe. And if you are on the YouTube channel, then subscribe to the podcast and you'll get material you can't get on the YouTube channel. But thank you so much for listening. And this episode is called, follow me here, it's kind of a long one, Episode 17, Season 2, Applying Polyvagal Theory to Heal Trauma and Vagus Nerve Stimulation for Trauma Recovery. That's Applying Polyvagal Theory to Heal Trauma. That's the first video that I'm repurposing, and it goes with this other video, which is Vagus Nerve Stimulation for Trauma Recovery. So I will be using that recording, and there are some visuals in this particular pair of videos that I'm repurposing for the audio. So if I refer to the visuals, I will include those visuals in the show notes if you want to look at them so you can see what I'm talking about. I created some visuals. I referenced the resources that I used for information for the visuals. So follow along, bear with me. And if you would rather just watch the videos, you can go over to the YouTube channel, go to the video playlist, and then you can watch Applying Polyvagal Theory to Heal Trauma, Applying Polyvagal Theory to Heal Trauma, and then after watching that one, you need to do it in that order, you can watch Vagus Nerve Stimulation for Trauma Recovery. That's Vagus Nerve Stimulation for Trauma Recovery. So if you'd rather watch the YouTube videos, and then that's fine too, but I'm putting this out here so you can be more educated about what happens in your nervous system with trauma and how you can use your own nervous system to help restore your body to natural balance. So I'm going to go to the recording in just a moment, but first, just a couple of updates. Of course, check out the Christian Emotional Recovery Facebook page. Feel free to join if you haven't. Check out the Christian Emotional Recovery YouTube channel, as I mentioned before, and the Patreon is back up, and Patreon is basically where if you'd like to support my work, you can subscribe for $5, $10, or $25 a month, and it's much appreciated. It allows me to keep doing what I'm doing. It helps you to help other trauma survivors, and you're also doing God's work, because I believe with all of my heart that God called me to do this, and so I'm just trying to do what I believe God told me to do. So check out the Patreon. I will link it in the show notes. And also, lastly, I have a little store open now, and I experimented with it. I started with one company and now I'm with another, but I will link that in the show notes as well. And if you would like, you can purchase the Acorn meditation for healing difficult emotions, and it is a meditation package. There are 4 versions of it, and if you purchase things from the store, I put that back into the store quite a bit as well. So you're supporting me and you're supporting the podcast and supporting other listeners like you as well. Thank you so much. God bless you. So let's jump right into the 2 videos, and I will put the visuals below in the show notes. So let's go ahead and listen to that. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Christian Emotional Recovery, the YouTube channel. If you haven't had a chance to, please go ahead and click on the subscribe bell and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And this channel is a Christian informed channel, but everyone is welcome. And this channel does come from a Christian perspective, but it's in a general way where it uses science and uses proven techniques based on research to help you heal trauma. So keep that in mind. So this channel is useful for anyone. Everyone is welcome. So today's video is called Applying the Polyvagal Theory to Heal Trauma. Applying the Polyvagal Theory to Heal Trauma. And you may or may not have heard the term polyvagal theory before. And I am going to do another video that goes along with this one. While I wouldn't call them a series, they do go together. So if it's been a couple of weeks since this video has been released, keep in mind that the other video is coming after this one. So first, I wanted to lay the foundation of what the polyvagal theory is and help you to understand how it informs trauma in your nervous system and how it can help you to heal trauma as well. Now, the polyvagal theory is somewhat tricky, somewhat complex. So please follow me here, bear with me. And so let's go ahead and jump right in. Now for this video, a lot of times you'll see my pretty little face, and I like to, talk to you person to person, but there are also times where I think using visuals will be more helpful. And while I like for this channel to be more about inspiring you and educating you, I'm not here to do PowerPoint charts and stuff like that, even though I am a professor, and I have to admit I'm a bit of a nerd and I do enjoy PowerPoint charts and stuff. The point is, this is something where I'm using visuals to help you understand it better, because the concepts can be complex and many people like me are visual. And so it can be helpful to have some videos that show visuals and help you understand certain concepts better. So I've created visuals for this particular video and for the polyvagal nerve video that you can find in a couple of weeks, or if you check it out after that. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. First of all, the polyvagal theory helps you understand how your nervous system works, how trauma gets stuck in the body, why you can't just think your way out of trauma. We've all heard that one before, right? Just believe, just think, just have faith, just pray. Well, if you have trauma stuck in your body, generally speaking, you don't heal that way. I'm not saying it can't happen, but generally speaking, you don't heal that way. And if you're like me, you got years and years of condemnation from yourself, from people at church, from family members, and from other people saying, well, you just don't have enough faith. You're not praying hard enough. No, that's not what it is. Trauma doesn't work that way. And polyvagal theory will help you understand the science, bona fide science that has been proven irrefutably behind how trauma works and how the polyvagal theory is involved in that process. Now, keep in mind, it's not just the polyvagal nerve and it's not just the polyvagal theory, but that is a large portion of how that trauma works in the nervous system. So you may be like, what do you mean? So let's go ahead and jump in and see. The polyvagal theory also helps you understand how you can find ways to heal trauma by targeting it in the body. Understanding this system will help you know why trauma gets stuck in the body, and you can become aware of these states and start practicing specific ways to stay in a regulated state. And regulated just means balanced, healthy, calm, in that state where you want to be more of the time, healthy and calm. So It's where you feel safe. So this will help you release trauma from your body, recondition your body, brain, mind, and nervous system into a relaxed state, and help you understand what is going on inside of you with trauma. The polyvagal theory, like I said, can be a bit tricky, so bear with me. But what it amounts to is the body has a series of nerves that are each responsible for different functions in the body. The vagus nerve, V-A-G-U-S, the vagus nerve regulates organ function in the body like digestion, circulation, and respiration or breathing, as well as your heartbeat, coughing, sneezing, swallowing, and the gag reflex. So the vagus nerve is absolutely essential to your survival and absolutely essential to the balance and homeostasis of your body. And as you know by now, if you followed this channel, trauma is very much a physical response as well as a mental and spiritual response. So I wanted to read a section. I will put the articles I'm using in the show notes. I'm using 3 articles for this video, and one of them is called The Polyvagal Theory and Healing Complex PTSD by Arielle Schwartz, and she's one of the foremost authorities on polyvagal and trauma therapies, and she has a PhD and specializes in this area. There's another article called Polyvagal Theory, An Approach to Understanding Trauma at Psychology Today by Robert Mueller, PhD, and Polyvagal Theory and Hope in Healing from Childhood Trauma by Shirley Davis at the CPTSD Foundation. So those are the articles I'm going to be working with today. So first I'm going to go to the Shirley Davis article and read a little section here because it gives you a good overview of what polyvagal theory is, and then I'm going to show you a visual of how polyvagal theory works. How is it relevant to me, you're probably asking. How does this work in my nervous system? How can I use this information to help me heal? All relevant questions, and we're going to answer those questions. So let's look at the Shirley Davis article first. A revisit of what polyvagal theory is in the CPTSD article by Shirley Davis. It says the vagal nerve is the longest cranial nerve controlling a human's inner nerve center, the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's the nervous system. There's two, we'll get to that in just a minute, but basically the vagal nerve is in the part of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is part of your overall nervous system. It oversees a vast range of vital functions communicating sensory input from outside triggers to the rest of the body. So knowing and understanding this information will help you understand polyvagal theory and how it can help you heal. It says polyvagal theory emphasizes the evolutionary development of 2 systems within the nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system, which ultimately is connected to the vagal nerve, and the sympathetic nervous system. Each has its own function and cause the body to react differently before, during, and after a traumatic or stressful event. If these 2 systems become damaged from excessive and recurrent trauma, a breakdown occurs and mental illness such as CPTSD and anxiety disorders may result. But the good news, this is me talking now. The good news is that there's a lot of research based on neuroplasticity, which means basically that you can create new neural connections in your brain and that you can change and you can grow and you can learn even as an adult. That through neuroplasticity and working with and doing repetitive exercises of healing, you can actually push that trauma back out through your neural network and heal, and your response will become more regulated as it should be, as God meant for it to be. Then it goes on to say the sympathetic nervous system gets the body ready for fight, flight, freeze response. With the fight or flight response, the sympathetic nervous system begins revving up the heartbeat and blood pressure and stealing blood from the body to make muscles ready to run. So it's a survival mechanism. We need it. We don't generally get chased by saber-toothed tigers or bears anymore, generally. But anyway, if there's any perception of danger, that gets going. So if you experience a lot of trauma, that's going to be going on in your body a lot because your body's not going to know how to shut down. And your body will flood with cortisol. And if you know anything about cortisol, that can cause health problems. It's a necessary part of our survival, but it gets put into overload if you've experienced a lot of trauma. Then it says, if there is nowhere to run and no hope to escape, the sympathetic nervous system will cause that person to freeze or collapse. Both are forms of disassociation. And then it says the parasympathetic nervous system is a calming force that, when kicked in, allows the heart rate and blood pressure to lower, calming down the body after a traumatic event. So this is my ideas again. An example is if when we're dying, this is kind of right in your face. But when we're dying, the parasympathetic nervous system often gets into overdrive because it's helping us to cope with that, quote, sting or shock of death. It helps us to be calm when we go through that experience. And so if an animal knows that they can't get away and they know they're going to get eaten, I don't mean to, just talk about anything triggering or disturbing, but this is part of nature, then they will shut down using the parasympathetic nervous system so that it kind of numbs them, if that makes sense. I won't go into any more detail about that because if you're like me, I love animals, and it's hard for me to watch those nature shows where lions are eating antelopes. I know it's part of nature. I don't blame the lion, but it's hard to watch. Yeah. So it says, if the sympathetic nervous system is hyper-aroused, then the body suffers from lack of adequate blood supply as the person is always ready to flee or fight. This damages the person's ability to calm down after being triggered by something that even barely resembles the danger that damaged their sympathetic nervous system. If the parasympathetic system does not kick in appropriately, the body suffers because the blood pressure can suddenly drop, leading to fainting and other physical problems. So in other words, some people who have experienced a lot of trauma, and you can experience both, but some people who have experienced a lot of trauma are in fight or flight all the time. The smallest little thing can trigger them, and it's not their fault. It's not your fault because your nervous system has been overstimulated and it doesn't know how to come back into that balance. Other people, they will disassociate and numb and just collapse. And in some cases, that's where people can't get out of bed because they're so depressed, or they're just curled up in a ball and can't do anything, either figuratively or literally. Most people that have trauma have a combination of these, and it is possible to kind of do both at the same time because you can have like a panic attack and then curl up in the bed in a depressive episode. So sometimes it can be both. So you want to find that balance of being in the middle. Now I want to make a note. It is part of your body's functioning to have both of these modes. And these modes are healthy and necessary in certain circumstances because they alert you to danger, whether it's literal physical danger or maybe somebody who is toxic. You start having red flags. That could be the fight or flight triggering just a little bit to let you know there's danger. And so these systems are necessary and even healthy. And there might be other times when you're just so tired you just shut down, or you have a health issue and your body needs to restore itself. So these modes are part of our body's way to help us to come back into balance, to create homeostasis, which is what that is. So keep in mind that those are healthy and they're not bad in and of themselves. It's just that a lot of times we get stuck in these modes too much, too often, too long, and we can flood our bodies with cortisol and cause health problems and autoimmune problems, and there's all kinds of research to back that up. So now I want to show you a visual of polyvagal theory so you can understand how all this comes together and see it like in front of you. And I think that'll help you to understand it better. All right, so this is a visual of polyvagal theory that I created myself. Please keep in mind that you can go and Google Polyvagal Theory and then look at images. So you know how on your computer you'll type something in, Google it, and then it's got like articles, news, videos, images, shopping. Just go to images and look through, and you'll see other people's interpretations of polyvagal theory. I just have one here that I wanted to try to make as simple and as straightforward as possible. And as a teacher, I really feel like I can do that to show you how this works. But polyvagal theory is the states of the nervous system and how they respond to stress, stimuli, and trauma based on the vagus or vagal nerve function, okay? And so overall, you have the nervous system. You know what the nervous system is. It regulates your neural pathways, it regulates mood, it regulates responses to stimuli, it regulates your brain. Your brain is part of it. Consider the brain the control center of your nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is what regulates your states. And your states are, now I have these in a certain color on purpose, and the states are in yellow. That's where you're deactivated, that's where you are hypo-aroused, you shut down, you freeze. And then in red, that's where your hyper-arousal happens, that's where you have fight or flight, that's where you're overstimulated and overwhelmed and you're in survival mode. And then the ideal state you want to be in is where you're balanced, you're in a window of tolerance, you're regulated, you're calm, and you feel safe. Okay, so let's look at these three states. First, let's start with when you're in fight or flight. When you're in fight or flight, you will feel like you're overwhelmed. That's called hyperarousal in terms of your nervous system. So if you experience trauma again and again and again, and you get in this state over and over and over again, you can find that you have trouble coming out of it. And that can cause all kinds of health problems, and then you will react to things in a way that isn't healthy and isn't balanced for that situation. And that is not your fault. If you've experienced chronic trauma, or maybe just one really overwhelming extreme traumatic event, it's totally normal to be in this state and not know how to get out of it. So that's what we're going to talk about, is how do we get back into regulation and what can we do about that. So this video, in combination with the one on the vagus nerve itself, will help you to do that. But it's good to understand how the system works so you can learn to manage your system. Now, the state that this is in is sympathetic, and that system is what activates fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system. It causes hyperarousal and fight or flight, and that's when you might have any of these or any combination of these. Dysregulation, fear, anxiety, activation, anger, frustration, agitation, and overwhelm. And it is normal to be in this state at times because that's part of life. Like I've said, it's normal that you need all three of these states, because if you have somebody who is creating red flags for you, having just a little bit of fight or flight that lets you know that there's something wrong is a good thing. It protects you. So these systems are normal and necessary and even healthy at times. If you're in a situation where a robber holds up a bank and you get in fight or flight, that's a good thing. It makes you alert so that you can stay safe and keep the people around you safe. And the same is true for shutdown. There are times when your body may need to restore itself after a physical trauma or after an illness, or there might be times when there's something that happens that's so traumatic, you have to shut down and gradually come back to accepting the reality of that. So these systems are there to protect us, and they are normal. However, if you're a survivor of severe and or chronic narcissistic abuse, childhood emotional neglect, emotional abuse, or adverse childhood experiences, you might get stuck in the fight or flight state more of the time because your vagus nerve and nervous system have trouble shutting these down because they're so used to being in that state. So this is how trauma gets stuck in the nervous system and creates complex trauma, or CPTSD. Okay, so that's fight or flight. That's how that works. I'll try to put it on the screen where you can see the whole thing. Now, the other one, the opposite extreme, which is also necessary, and there are times it's healthy to be in that state, like when you're really exhausted and you just need to shut down and rest, or you're recovering from an illness or a surgery. The state is dorsal vagal. dorsal vagal. And when you shut down or freeze and you have hypoarousal, the parasympathetic nervous system is the part of your body and your nervous system that is activated and that is being used at that time. And keep in mind, the vagus nerve is is contributing to all of this at this time. That's why it's called polyvagal theory. So you shut down or freeze, and in those states you may be any combination of these things: tired, exhausted, numb, depressed, hopeless, helpless, shame, trapped, immobile, disassociated, denial, and disconnected. Now, all of these states are not healthy, but there are times where they may be a coping mechanism that temporarily is healthy, if that makes sense. For example, if somebody you love dies, grief is a totally normal experience. It's part of something you need to go through in order to grieve for that person. And so being in dorsal vagal is completely normal, completely part of life, and completely understandable. And so it is normal to be in this state at times. It's part of life. However, if you're a survivor of severe and or chronic narcissistic abuse, again, childhood emotional neglect, emotional abuse, and or adverse childhood experiences, you might defer to this state to avoid strong emotional reactions or as a survival mechanism because your nervous system is trying to protect you and put up a wall. So if you're in fight or flight all the time, your body may shut down because it just can't handle things anymore. And that's also normal and part of your body protecting the nervous system and protecting you and protecting your emotions. Emotions can be so overwhelming that we need to deal with them a little bit at a time. A lot of spiritual and healing and psychological teachers will tell you that you need to try to deal with as much trauma at once. I do not agree with that. I think that can re-traumatize you, and I actually have a video on 10 ways to avoid re-traumatizing yourself when you're trying to heal. I'll put that in the show notes. 10 ways to avoid re-traumatizing yourself when you're trying to heal. And if you want to know more about why you should not overwhelm yourself when you're healing your trauma, you should do it a little bit at a time. That video will give you a lot of specific insights. But sometimes we can get stuck in this state, which can be the opposite end of CPTSD. So it's still complex trauma, but it's just the opposite end of where you're shut down. Now, the place you want to be in the most, keep in mind you don't want to be there all the time because there are feeling your emotions and living the full spectrum of life is healthy, and that's part of life, right? But the place you want to be the most time is in ventral vagal state. And that is the system that's activated is the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system. But it's in that window of tolerance. It's called the window of tolerance. And that's when you're regulated. That's when you're communicating with people. That's when you're connected. That's when you feel safe. That's also when you experience social engagement, progress, peace, calm, you're able to think logically, you're able to be productive. Now, you can be in fight or flight and be productive, but that's not a healthy kind of productive because you're like a headless chicken. In this one, you're calm and you're in control, and so you're sort of like that poem, I am the master of my fate, I am the captain of my soul. I forgot exactly, but there's a poem like that. And then you're grounded, you're mindful, you're compassionate, you're full of love. You're able to love other people and love yourself and love God. You're full of joy and happiness more in this state. And so that's where most people prefer to be, even though all the states are necessary. But you want to be there more of the time in order to be balanced and healthy and to heal your trauma. So this is the ideal state where you are in your window of tolerance and you're most functional for everyday life. As your healing work continues around trauma, and you learn about your states, you will do active practices to return to regulation, and you'll be in this state more and more as you heal. That's the key right there. That's the key. That's how you will be able to overcome trauma and heal it in your body. You have to go through your mind and your body, both, in order to heal trauma, to get at the root of it. But the ideal state, to be able to be in regulation more, the more you are in regulation, the more is a result of your healing. A direct result of your healing. All right, So there is an overarching sort of concept of the polyvagal theory that Deb Dana is one of the foremost authorities on polyvagal theory as well, especially in teaching it and using it to heal the body. And she created sort of an idea map or a framework for polyvagal theory, just so you can understand it better overall and see how it all comes together. So bear with me. Like I said, I'm not trying to do a lecture like you're in a college class, but I think understanding how this works in your body and how it all comes together will help you to be able to understand how to regulate your own nervous system better. So the polyvagal theory overall, we already talked about the hierarchy of the polyvagal theory, but she includes 3 parts that are the organizing principles of polyvagal theory. And the 3 organizing principles are hierarchy, neuroception, and co-regulation. Now, hierarchy, we just talked about, and that's the 3 nervous system states from the autonomic nervous system. You have the sympathetic state, which is when you are deactivated. You have the sympathetic state, which is when you are in fight or flight. You have the dorsal vagal, which is when you are deactivated. And you have the ventral vagal, which is the ideal state you want to be in for regulation and calmness. Okay, that's the sign that you're healing. Those are the 3 nervous system states. And that's the hierarchy. She didn't come up with the hierarchy, I don't think. But she just took that and connected it to this larger concept map. Now, there's something called neuroception, and that is when your nervous system scans the environment for safety and danger. And neuroception is what puts you in one of these 3 states and decides which state do I need to be in to help me to be safe and to do what I need to do to survive. Okay? So the nervous system scans the environment for safety and danger. Oops, I put that twice. That's okay. And then pays attention to what is going on inside the body, in the environment, and in interacting with others. Okay? So first it scans the environment, but that's the inside of your inside. And that's the part of the environment. And then the outside, the surrounding things around you. And then how do those 2 relate? That's how neuroception works. It pays attention to all those things, including what other people are doing, and then decides what state you need to go into so your body starts feeling with endorphins. If you need to calm down, your body starts feeling with cortisol if you need to go into fight or flight, and then your body reacts with the heartbeat and the circulation and the breathing and all those things that need to put you in that state so you can do what you need to do to survive, whether it's literal survival or stuff that's more like modern world type stuff. Now, co-regulation is the 3rd concept, co-regulation, and that connects here with interacting with others. There is a biological need to connect with other people to survive. That is how vital it is to have relationships with other people. Now, there's a lot of ways you can do that. You can have a relationship with a family member, a friend, even a therapist in a professional setting can be good, and you can also have pets. There's a lot of ways you can co-regulate. But there is a biological need for connection to survive, because in the caveman days, the old days, and some cultures are still like this, you need to be part of a tribe or a village in order to have food, to have companionship, to reproduce, and those are all part of survival in the natural world. And so being around others who are well-regulated themselves regulates our nervous system. It doesn't take a genius to know that. It doesn't take a lot of research, even though there's tons of research to back it up. But being around people who are calm, who are healthy, who put green flags in front of you, meaning, yes, this is good, this is healthy, this person is safe, versus red flags, that's a good thing. So you want to seek those people out and those situations out. And you can even co-regulate by watching videos of healthy people and learning things from healthy people online. Even though an in-person relationship is ideal, talking on the phone, doing a video chat, all of those are legit ways. Even Facebook, in a healthy way, is a good way to create co-regulation. So keep that in mind. Having a pet, going into the natural world, you can co-regulate with your environment if it's a calming and healthy and safe environment. So keep that in mind as well. So find ways to co-regulate with other people, places, things, and animals, especially people, is very healthy. And I would argue too, as Christians, that co-regulating can also happen in our relationship with God by meditating and practicing on God's presence, by reading scripture, by praying, by just feeling God's presence when we're in nature or when we're just having our quiet time with God. That is also co-regulation. So this is the polyvagal theory. This is how it all comes together. And these three states are the three states that are how trauma works and how overcoming trauma works as well. So I wanted to go over some solutions. What do you do? It's one thing to tell you to try to be in the calm state more, to do the healing work. That's what this channel is all about. All of that helps you to go back into that ideal regulated state, ventral vagal. But I'm going to go over 3 solutions in the Ariel Schwartz article that I mentioned earlier, and those will give you just a couple of solutions that can help you to get started on regulating your nervous system and coming back into that regulated state of ventral vagal. Okay, so let's look at that article real quick here. So 3 solutions that Ariel Schwartz, like I said, she is an expert on polyvagal theory. And I've actually followed a lot of some of her work. And under the article that she wrote in CPTSD Foundation as well, it's a different article though than the Shirley Davis one. The takeaway, she says, healing from CPTSD, which is complex PTSD, involves recognizing that there is another way to live. You are not doomed to repeat patterns of your past. You can use the polyvagal theory to help you heal from CPTSD using the following important steps. And keep in mind, these are just 3 she listed. There are dozens more, but these are some of the basic ones. Self-compassion. Develop a self-compassion for your symptoms. Recognize the physiological, somatic, basis of symptoms and why you cannot simply think your way out of trauma reactions, which is what I've been talking about this whole time. You can't just think your way out of this. You've got to get in the body. You've got to get to the root of it. You've got to deal with it from that place. The somatic therapies, which is body work, are the most effective. Now, the other stuff is necessary, like journaling and talk therapy. That can all help. Venting to a friend. But the somatic work is where it's primarily at. Developing somatic or body awareness. Learn to mindfully track subtle changes in your body sensations and heart rate. One way to do that is through meditation. You slow down and you focus on your body. And it also helps you to get into a regulated state. Identify your own personal signs of stress. Know yourself. This will help you respond right away before the stress starts to feel overwhelming or out of control. We call this staying in the window of tolerance. So I said this in some other talks, but there is a point of power that is between the stimulus and your reaction. That space between the stimulus or the thing that happens and your response or reaction to it, that is where you need to be aware. And that's really, really hard at first. The more you meditate, the more you practice body awareness, the more you do somatic work, the more you'll be able to do this. Okay? So I'm not going to get into the details of it, but there's a lot of ways that you can develop somatic and body awareness. And those somatic therapies, somatic healing and somatic and body work healing for trauma are ways to do that. And one that I recommend highly is meditation, grounding, and body scans. Meditation, grounding, and body scans help you to become more aware of your body's states so you can stay in that window of tolerance. Keep in mind, though, that sometimes when something happens, you need to have fight or flight. You need to shake. You need to let that work through your body. That's how an event doesn't create trauma. So there's a balance there. That doesn't mean every little thing that happens, though, you need to go into hyperarousal. That's not healthy. It's those big traumatic things that you need to let that come through your body. Let your body shake. Let somebody witness that with you and keep you safe if possible. If you see somebody in that state, just hold their hand or be there with them and tell them it's okay. It's okay to feel this way. If you're a safe presence and you are an embodied presence for them or for yourself, or you let God do that for you when you're in that state, you will not be as traumatized after it because you will have let that stuff come out through your neural network, you see? Now, the third one that Ariel Schwartz talks about is practicing attentional control through attention. Practice focusing your attention on specific cues in your environment that remind you that you are safe now. For example, I look around and I'm in my office. The sky is blue, the wind is blowing, it's cool outside, it's like 70 degrees. I'm alone, I love to spend time by myself. It's quiet. So what in your environment reminds you you're safe? It might be that your dog is lying at your feet or your cat's in your lap purring. It might be that you know that your spouse that you feel safe with and that you love is at work and that he or she will come home, or that you're at work and you know that you'll come home and see your kids this evening. It can be a lot of things, but what makes you safe? What realities around you make you safe? Look around your room. Notice the light filtering through the window, a piece of art that you love on the wall, or how it feels to be reading this article. You can also listen to your favorite piece of music, hold an object in your hand, or notice a calming scent of an essential oil, for example. She says, remember, you are myelinating the neural pathways of your social nervous system every time you feel safe. That means making new neural connections, connecting to another person, or compassionate towards yourself. Each time you practice strengthening your social nervous system, it will become stronger, and regulation will become more dominant, which is healing your trauma. That's me. She says you can change your physiology one day at a time, so a little bit at a time. And over time, it will become easier to connect positive states and override defensive associations with post-traumatic stress. Okay, so those are some techniques that will help you. Now, if you want to, and like I said, if it's been at least 2 weeks since this video came out, I want you to go now and look for the video called Vagus Nerve Stimulation for Trauma Recovery, because that will take you further into regulating yourself and how to use the vagus nerve to do specific exercises that can help you come into regulation more and more and more and heal your trauma through those somatic practices. Okay? Thank you so much. Remember, you are fearfully and wonderfully made. God loves you, and God bless you. Hello everyone, and welcome to Christian Emotional Recovery's YouTube channel. And I'm your host, Rachel Leroy. And this video is going to be about the vagus nerve. And the title of this one is called Vagus Nerve Stimulation for Trauma Recovery. It's called Vagus Nerve Stimulation for Trauma Recovery. Now, this video is a tool that goes with another video that I created a couple of weeks ago. And if you're watching this later, it should already be posted. And if not, you should still be able to get the video. Before you watch this one, if you haven't watched the video called Applying the Polyvagal Theory to Heal PTSD, I recommend going back and watching it because it lays a foundation of knowledge that will help you understand this video better. So I want to just talk a little bit about what the vagus nerve is, and that will lay a foundation. Now, this stuff, like I said, is pretty advanced. And like I said, no matter how much I read about polyvagal theory, the nervous system, the brain, and the vagus nerve, I always learn something new because there's so much to learn. It's so complex. And I'm trying to distill this information in a way so it's easy to understand, so bear with me. I don't underestimate your ability to understand it. It's more my ability to disseminate it in a way that's understandable, if that makes sense. Because polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve, it took me a long time to understand them, and I'm still learning stuff. It's tricky stuff. So I wanted first to tell you the sources that I'm using for this, and if you want to learn more about the vagus nerve and vagal nerve stimulation, you can check out these articles, but one of them is How Does Vagus Nerve Stimulation Reduce PTSD Symptoms? And that's in Psychology Today, and it's by Christopher Berglund. And then The next one is Brief Explanation of Trauma and Vagus Nerve by the Ohio Domestic Violence Network. The next one is The Vagus Nerve in Trauma Recovery by Dr. Arielle Schwartz. She's one of the foremost experts in therapies for the vagus nerve. And then What is the Vagus Nerve in Helpline by Jill Salati Schulman, PhD. And the last article is 5 Ways to Simulate Your Vagus Nerve in the Cleveland Clinic by the Cleveland Clinic. Okay, so those are the 5 articles that I'm using for this video. What is the vagus nerve and what does it do? The vagus nerve, it says there are 12 cranial nerves in the body, and they come in pairs and help link the brain with other areas of the body such as the head, neck, and torso. And by the way, the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in the body and the longest cranial nerve in the body, I believe. And it says some send sensory information, including details about smells, sights, taste, and sounds to the brain. These nerves have sensory functions. Other cranial nerves control movement of various muscles and the function of certain glands. These are known as motor functions. While some cranial nerves have either sensory or motor functions, others have both. The vagus nerve is such a nerve. The cranial nerves are classified using Roman numerals based on their location. The vagus nerve is also called cranial nerve 10, or X. X marks the spot here. Explore the diagram below to see the location of the vagus nerve. And I will show you a brief image of the vagus nerve in the Helpline article, and you can see what it looks like, just to get a picture of it, to see what it looks like. So what does the vagus nerve affect? What does the vagus nerve affect? It says the vagus nerve, also called the pneumogastric nerve, is responsible for various internal organ functions, including digestion, heart rate, breathing, cardiovascular activity, reflexes such as coughing, sneezing, swallowing, and vomiting. Fun, huh? It plays a role in the autonomic nervous system, which controls actions people do unconsciously, such as breathing and digestion. It may also form a link between the gut and the brain. You've probably heard some of the latest research on the brain-gut connection, playing a role in what scientists call the gut-brain axis. In recent years, experts have been studying the gut-brain axis to look for links between conditions such as obesity and depression. And then it goes on to talk about how the vagus nerve works and how it's set up and how it controls our sensory input and output in our bodies, including basically how we respond to stimuli. And that's why I want you to go back and watch that other video I recommended, because this might not make full sense unless you watch the other video, because the other video has some great information that gives you a foundation of what polyvagal theory is and tells you more about the vagus nerve. This is more jumping right into vagus nerve stimulation with just a brief foundation. So there's another section in the brief, there's an article that I mentioned, the brief explanation article, and there's a section there called Vagus Nerve is what relaxes us. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the function of the vagus nerve, because that's the whole reason we're here, but to see all the other systems in the body that it impacts and even controls shows you how pervasive vagal nerve damage can be. And if you do vagal nerve stimulation exercises, you can start to heal some of that. So it doesn't just heal your trauma, but it can actually help your physical health as well, especially in those areas. So in this brief explanation article, it's a visual, more an infographic more than an article, but it's an article. And there's a little section that says the vagus nerve is what relaxes us. And this is the function of the vagus nerve. It says the vagus nerve is basically listening to the way we breathe, and it sends the brain and the heart whatever message our breath indicates. Breathing slowly, for instance, reduces oxygen demands of the heart muscle, the myocardium, and our heart rate drops, relaxing us. And so that's how the vagus nerve regulates our body in terms of stress and in terms of trauma, in a very, very neat description. There's a lot more to it than that, obviously. So, just a really quick and dirty review of the polyvagal theory, because in order to understand this, you do need to know about the polyvagal theory, and I did strongly encourage you to watch the other video if you haven't, but let me just give you a very quick rundown of the polyvagal theory and how that connects with the stimulation of the vagus nerve. So, there's an article called The Vagus Nerve in Trauma Recovery by Ariel Schwartz, and there's a section in there, and let me just give you a little bit more in terms of what the vagus nerve does to help you with trauma recovery. Ariel Schwartz says, many distressing symptoms of PTSD are felt in the body: a tightness in the chest, a sinking feeling in the stomach, a familiar knot in the throat, or as a chronic feeling of exhaustion. We now recognize that we must turn toward the body as part of the healing process, and as a result, we have seen a surge in the use of yoga, mindfulness, Tai Chi, Qigong, massage, craniosacral, nutritional counseling, and acupuncture for the treatment of PTSD. These mind-body therapies help us to be less vulnerable to stress, less reactive, less impulsive. We increase our awareness of the choices that we have to help us feel grounded and calm. We feel more in control. One way the mind-body therapies work is by stimulating the vagus nerve. Knowledge about how this nerve works provides us a fundamental understanding of traumatic stress and facilitates our ability to heal. As a result, the vagus nerve has taken central stage in trauma therapy. And Ariel Schwartz says mind-body therapies work with the vagus nerve to help you find balance. In this post article, you will find a variety of breath and movement practices aimed to stimulate and reset the vagus nerve. And I'm going to go over 10 practices very briefly each in just a few minutes so that you have some vagus nerve stimulation exercises that you can do. And among those, you have choices of things you feel comfortable with, you can use discernment with, and figure out what works for you. Back to Ariel Schwartz's quote. She says, through a process of self-study and mindful body awareness, you can start to learn strategies that help you restore a sense of safety and heal from trauma. And that's Dr. Ariel Schwartz, The Benefits of Body-Mind Therapies. And so that's a little bit about the polyvagal nerve, how vagus nerve stimulation can help you heal from PTSD. And just keep in mind that the vagal nerve stimulation connects to the polyvagal theory, and it impacts that system. It impacts your sympathetic, your parasympathetic, and your autonomic nervous system, and it puts it more in balance so that you're less in fight or flight and you're more in that window of tolerance, the window of tolerance being that calm, alert, receptive, loving, joyful state that is more neutral and healthier, not in disassociation, disconnection, understimulation, or overstimulation in fight or flight. So, you need to be in those others at certain times, but not as much as people who have suffered from trauma are. And their bodies are stuck there. And so these exercises help you to regulate. And this is a specific way you can do that. This is not just theory, this is practice. And so Trauma and the Vagus Nerve from Ariel Schwartz tells you a little bit more about why trauma can impact the vagus nerve's function. So in order to heal, one thing that you need to be able to do is to understand how this whole process works. If you understand your body, then you won't react to it as much. You'll come at it with compassion and understanding for yourself and for other people that are having these responses in their bodies. So let's read a little bit about how trauma can impact the vagus nerve. Trauma and the Vagus Nerve by Ariel Schwartz. She says, when we experience a threat, real or perceived, we change how we breathe. For example, in the old days, if a saber-toothed tiger started chasing us. Now, it could just be an abusive person calls us, or we see them walking towards us out of nowhere. Those are just examples. But she says here, we can get a clear picture by imagining the ways in which animals respond to predators. In some cases, an animal will breathe rapidly into the upper chest, which is a sympathetic nervous system response that helps them flee or fight in a threatening situation. In some cases, an animal will freeze, which involves breathing shallowly or holding the breath in order to avoid being sensed by a predator. This freeze reaction leads the animal to stand very still, which is an immobilization response to threat. In some cases, animals will faint so that the predator, who is not a scavenger, might lose interest in a dead animal. Both the freeze and faint responses are facilitated by an evolutionary older path of the vagus nerve and part of the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is that overall system that has us response to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And then she says, most importantly, once safe, an animal will release the stress response through shaking and breathing in a way that restores homeostasis. However, we humans will often stay in both high activation, fight or flight, or low activation, freeze and faint, responses for extended periods of time. This tends to be the case when trauma is chronic and repeated, as in the case of complex PTSD. Additionally, we often do not have sufficient opportunities to process stressful or traumatic events. You need to let that stuff shake out of your body. Crying and shaking is part of the process. It's healthy. And if you don't, sometimes it gets stuck in your body. And when you're a child, you don't know how to process trauma, so you don't know to let that happen. And then you get this stuff stuck in your body because it's chronic. She said this can lead to physical tension and restricted breathing patterns that form the basis of our posture, movement patterns, and overall sense of self. Okay, so that's a little bit about how trauma impacts the vagus nerve and vice versa, and how it happens with humans, in why that how things function the way they do for us. So, when we get stuck in trauma, we get trauma stuck in our bodies, or we get stuck in fight or flight. It can get stuck in this mode after a while and not know how to come out. It can also impair the function of the vagus nerve and cause damage, which can impact how the nerve functions, causing our response to stimuli to overstimulate the vagus nerve as well as other systems that work within it. It isn't because there's something wrong with your nervous system or you or your vagus nerve per se, but that so much stress has been put on you for so long that it has trouble functioning and that system has trouble shutting down. So what happens if your vagus nerve doesn't properly function? And I want to read a little bit. This is a very article-heavy video, so bear with me. But I wanted to read a little bit about what happens when your body doesn't properly function because the vagus nerve has been overstimulated for so long. So let's look at the role of the vagus nerve, impacts of the vagus nerve, and what the vagus nerve regulates. And this information came from the Healthline article. And the vagus nerve, like when you have problems, it can cause issues with speaking, issues swallowing. It can impact the gag reflex. It can cause low blood pressure. It can cause slow or fast heartbeat. It can cause issues with digestion. It can cause nausea and vomiting, and it can cause abdominal pain. Okay, so the role of the vagus nerve is vital to daily function in your everyday life. And what does the vagus nerve regulate overall? It regulates digestion. And keep in mind there are other nerves that regulate these things, and it does impact other parts of the body, but this is what it regulates overall. It can regulate digestion, heart rate, breathing, cardiovascular activity, which if the vagus nerve misfunctions really badly, can be life-threatening in some cases. Usually it's not, but it can be. Cardiovascular activity, coughing and sneezing, and swallowing and gagging. So that's the impacts of the vagus nerve and the role of the vagus nerve and in terms of the body. So if you start healing the vagus nerve and doing vagal stimulation exercises, you can actually improve the function of these areas of the body. And this is based on science, okay? This is fact. And so we'll talk about some of the benefits of vagus nerve stimulation practice in just a little bit. So when we start talking about vagus nerve stimulation and the benefits of it, it has vast vast influence and benefits in both the mind and the body. And do you see how the mind and body, how in Chinese medicine they're considered one thing? Science has pretty much backed that up irrefutably, just by how the nerves work and how they impact the physical body and vice versa. There is a mind-body connection there. So the benefits of the vagus nerve stimulation, I'm getting this from the Ariel Schwartz article, The Vagus Nerve and Trauma Recovery from the Center for Resilience-Informed Therapy. And I made a chart out of the information that I got off of that article. And Ariel Schwartz said, I already used this quote, so I won't do the quote again, but the benefits of vagus nerve stimulation and mind-body practices include the following. And I'm sorry this is kind of small, but let me zoom in here just a little bit so you can see it. Improvements to the physical and mental health of your body. Reduced opiate and psychotropic use, so addiction becomes less prominent. Enhanced emotional well-being. Better social relationships. Reduced autonomic sympathetic activation, which is fight or flight. Reduced blood pressure. Improved neuroendocrine activity. Improved thyroid health. Improved blood sugar management. Improved digestive system health. Reduced inflammation, improvements in rheumatoid arthritis, decreased reported symptoms of PTSD, improved vagal tone, which is that nerve, how it functions overall, and increased HRV or heart rate variability. That's your heart's ability to speed up and slow down, and that increases your heart's health and your ability to lower your blood pressure and regulate other systems in your body, including coming out of fight or flight more easily. Okay, so heart rate variability, HRV, might be something you would want to do some more research on. But that's a little bit about the role of the vagus nerve and the benefits of vagal nerve stimulation, so you can see that there's science backing this and that it will help you to do vagal nerve exercises to heal trauma as well as help heal chronic conditions in your body. If you have PTSD, I can almost guarantee you have some kind of chronic systematic issue with your body in some way, because it puts a strain on your body. Your body's not meant to spend all that time in fight or flight. Okay, so I wanted to now talk about 10 vagus nerve stimulation exercises, and keep in mind that there are some that are more specialized that are called polyvagal exercises, and these are things that also benefit you in other ways, but there are some that are tailored just to the vagus nerve and polyvagal nerve stimulation, and those are a little more complicated. I encourage you to Google or actually go to YouTube, because a lot of these can get a little tricky to do. Not the ones I'm going to share here, but the ones that I'm talking about that are a little more advanced. And I will include some resources too on vagal nerve stimulation and polyvagal theory in the show notes, and I'll mention them at the end of the video as well. But let's look at 10 vagus nerve stimulation exercises. Now, I want to give credit to the source here. I got this from 2 articles. One is The Vagus Nerve and Trauma Recovery by Ariel Schwartz, and the other one is 5 Ways to Stimulate Your Vagus Nerve from the Cleveland Clinic. So I'm getting these ideas directly from them, and I wanted to credit them because that's where the ideas came from. And I'm actually quoting them word for word, so I did put quotation marks around the quotations. So let's look at 10 vagus nerve and trauma healing exercises, stimulation exercises. The first one is meditation. I talk about meditation all the time. Again, pray, use your discernment. You don't have to do any of these. Experiment. Do the ones that feel right for you. Do the ones that work for you. And it's, but this one says, meditation can regulate your autonomic nervous system, says Dr. Esther Malik. And Esther Malik is a facial pain expert, and facial pain is strongly connected to the cranial nerves and the vagus nerve. So he is an expert in this field. And I've had some nerve pain, and I've actually thought about consulting him. So he is one of the foremost authorities in the field. But he says it has a good effect on lowering rapid breathing, rapid heart rate, and cortisol levels. Number 2, exercise. Exercise lowers your sympathetic nervous activity and controls your parasympathetic response so that you have a good balance when it comes to cardiovascular and respiratory function, says Dr. Esther Malik. Okay? So exercise helps you to regulate your nervous system, and that helps you to stimulate and exercise your vagal nerve as well, because it's giving it work to do, and that's actually a good thing in this case versus extreme stress. That's the difference between a rapid heart rate when you're stressed out versus a rapid heart rate when you're exercising. One is not healthy, the other is, okay? Number 3, massage. Research shows that reflexology, a kind of massage, can increase vagal tone and even decrease blood pressure. Massage can reduce some of the heightened activity in the vagus nerve, says Dr. Esther Malik. Try giving yourself a foot massage by rotating your ankle, rubbing your sole in short strokes, and gently stretching your toes back and forth. Number 4, music. We've all heard that music is the language of the soul. It literally is the language to the soul, because that's our brain, our nervous system in terms of what the soul is in the body. And so he says music can help motivate us. It brings us joy and taps into our emotions. When it comes to the vagus nerve, research is mixed on how music affects it. Your vagus nerve is connected to your vocal cords, the muscles at the back of your throat, and passes through your inner ear. Try humming and singing or just listening to calm, soothing music. The sounds and vibrations may stimulate your vagus nerve. That's why some people will do like bells and wind chimes and crystal bowls and stuff like that, because there's a resonance to them that's healing. And that's why some people also do I know a lot of Christians don't do that and don't want to do that, and that's fine. There are alternatives to that as well, but that is one reason that has health benefits. There's a lot of science to back that up, okay? So number 5, cold immersion, cold water immersion. A lot of people will think, that's crazy, but it works. It works. And the article says plenty of professional athletes use cold water immersion to improve short-term feelings of relaxation. Research shows that cold water immersion may help with stress by slowing your heart rate and directing blood flow to your brain. Try placing an ice pack on your face or neck or taking a cold shower. Or for heaven's sakes, you can just just sticking your hands under cold water when you have a panic attack has been proven to help. Splash cold water on your face. And even if you don't want to do cold water, warm water also has an effect. It's not as strong as the cold water, but it can be helpful as well. So try those tricks. Number 6, these are from the Ariel Schwartz article. Attend to your gut. Attend to your gut. She says you can also increase the health of your vagus nerve by maintaining a healthy digestive system. The enteric nervous system, also called the belly brain, is made up of microbiome that lives in your gut. Basically, take a probiotic, eat healthy, try to take antibiotics as little as possible, drink kombucha, eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, eat a lot of things that restore your gut balance in terms of your bacteria. Probiotics, prebiotics, all of that stuff is really good. Taking fiber, and like I said, eating high fiber diets and stuff like that are all helpful things. Plant-based diets, I'm one to talk. I eat a lot of meat, but I try to eat my fruits and vegetables too. So laugh out loud. Laugh out loud. Even if it's watching stupid cat videos on YouTube or the dumb things that make you laugh, that's okay. Just laugh. It says, it has been said that laughter is the best medicine. It creates a natural high of endorphins throughout your body. A good belly laugh naturally changes how you breathe, your heart rate, and your blood pressure. It lowers your blood pressure. So stay on the lookout for a laughter meditation, a fun friend, a good comedian to give your vagus nerve a good workout, or a stupid cat or dog video, which is what I like to watch. And then the vagus nerve and trauma recovery, that's where this is coming from, keep in mind. And then number 8, there's 3 more. Shake it out. Now this one sounds kind of crazy too, but it works. It works. You ever see how a dog comes out of a lake and then shakes all that water off? It also helps them to come out from that coldness and warm their body back up. It's not just getting the water off. It says, inspired by animals in the wild, you can use a simple shaking practice to let go of physical tension or come out of a freeze response. First, scan your body with awareness to notice areas of tension. Then, focus on these spots and one at a time, give yourself permission to shake them out. Allow yourself to surrender to the shaking, and if possible, let yourself release any sounds to accompany the movement. When you feel complete, take a moment to pause in the stillness and notice the subsequent release. The next one is honeybee breath, and that's kind of like music, but it's a different thing because it's more like a humming meditation. And like I said, use your discretion and pray about this one. You don't have to do it. There are variations of it, but just keep in mind that it is an option. The honeybee breath, and this is one that I've done in some yoga classes that I've been in. Like I said, I'm not saying you have to do yoga, but that's just one option, okay? So it says vagus nerve passes by vocal cords and inner ear, and therefore humming and singing both can have a calming effect on your nervous system. In yoga, Bhamari pranayama, or honeybee breath, provides an opportunity to experiment with a humming sound. In this practice, I invite you to sit in a comfortable position and close your ears and palms, thumbs facing down. On the exhale, create a humming sound to vibrate your eardrum. Repeat as long as desired. And then number 10, rinse and repeat. This isn't so much a separate technique as how to use these techniques effectively. You can't do one of these techniques one time and expect to get long-term vagal nerve healing. You need to do them over and over and over again and keep finding other vagus nerve stimulation exercises. Just doing things that are healthy, that feel good, that are good for your mind and good for your body generally, as you can tell with these exercises, will help you to stimulate your vagal nerve. So do more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff. Sounds obvious, but it's true. Rinse and repeat. It says, in truth, the vagus nerve is constantly moving us in and out of balance as we are always adapting to changing demands of our world. Therefore, we often need to repeat vagus nerve balancing exercises. This is the reason why many mind-body therapies are used as a daily practice. That's why you do daily practice of healing trauma. That's why you do daily practice of vagus nerve therapy and healing. And those are all working together to help heal you from trauma, help get the trauma out of your body, and help you to live the life that God intended you to live. Okay? So those are 10 practices for vagus nerve stimulation. So how does this connect with putting you back in states of regulation? So when you do this, your body is able to come back to that state where you're more regulated and your vagus nerve becomes more toned. And if your vagus nerve becomes more toned, it's able to bring you back into regulation even more so. It's like it has a snowball effect. The more you regulate, the more you're able to regulate. The more you regulate, the more you're able to regulate. And that's where those vagal exercises stimulate the vagus nerve and make it stronger and healthier and help it to heal. And so also, I will include some resources here where you can go explore further on the topic. I'll include the 5 articles that I used as references for this talk. I'll put those in the show notes. And also, I'll include some books, but let me list those here. And so, one thing I want to note, there's a lot of books out there on polyvagal theory and polyvagal vagus nerve stimulation. Don't use all of them. Not all sources are created equal. I am an English teacher, and I have years and years of experience teaching students how to find information. And not all sources are created equal. You want reputable sources from good research. Some of these people just make stuff up, and I'll just be honest, some of it's crap. There's a lot of stuff, especially on audible.com. I like Audible books, and so I get a lot of those. And there's just this random stuff about vagus nerve stimulation, and there's like 1,000 good reviews, and it almost looks like the reviews are bought or something. And so just be careful about trusting this stuff. And so I'll curate for you some resources that I know are reputable. They are hard books to read and understand. They're pretty advanced in some ways scientifically. It's neuroscience. You've heard of a brain scientist. There's a reason why that's considered advanced and difficult. So just keep in mind that some of it takes a little bit of reading to understand it, but give it a shot and give it a chance. Of course, you can do YouTube searches for polyvagal exercises and vagus nerve stimulation, but some books on polyvagal exercises and vagus nerve stimulation I recommend are Polyvagal Exercises for Safety and Connection by Deb Dana. She's one of the foremost people in the field, and I've also taken some courses where she's been one of the people in it, and she's good. Polyvagal Exercises for Safety and Connection. And another one is Accessing the Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve by Stanley Rosenberg. That one is very advanced, but it has polyvagal exercises near the end of the book. So that might be one. You could also look up Stanley Rosenberg. He may not be there himself, but there are other people that show you how to do his exercises. Just look up Vagus Nerve Stimulation or Polyvagal Nerve Stimulation by Stanley Rosenberg. Go to YouTube and look that up, and you can find some exercises there. And you can also find them in his book, Accessing the Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve. And another one is Daily Vagus Nerve Exercises by Millie Brown. I haven't read this one. I read the other two, but I haven't read this one. But this one is, it just had a lot of good reviews, and it looked like something that was more solid. So Daily Vagus Exercises by Millie Brown may be a good one too. Books on Polyvagal Theory to Heal Trauma. The Body Keeps the Score is the foremost authority on that, on trauma healing, and that's by Bessel van der Kolk. The Body Keeps the Score. Another one is Anchored, How to Befriend Your Nervous System Using Polyvagal Theory, also by Deb Dana and Stephen Porges. Stephen Porges is another foremost authority in the field. Anchored, How to Befriend Your Nervous System Using Polyvagal Theory. And another one is The Polyvagal Theory, The Transformative Power of Feeling Safe by Stephen Porges. The Polyvagal Theory, The Transformative Power of Feeling Safe. So those are some resources that can help you to sort of cut through some of the garbage so you don't end up getting stuff that's no good, because there's a lot of stuff like that out there on this. But these books can be pretty advanced, like I said, and I have read some sections twice to understand them, and I have advanced degrees in English, so reading these can be pretty tricky, so just be patient with it, okay? And try to find ones that put things more in layman's terms. But don't give up. Don't give up. Persist and start small, and also proceed with caution. As with any kind of treatment with trauma, do it with care and see what works for you. What works for one person won't work for another. What worked for you last year may not work for you this year, and what works this year may not work next year, or vice versa. So just keep that in mind, okay? So that's how you can use the vagus nerve stimulation exercises to help you heal trauma. And it's also how polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve ties into all that. Thank you so much for going on this journey with me. Thank you for listening. I know this is a lot of stuff in this video, but I hope that it will get you started on educating you on how polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve can help you. Remember to go look at the other video that is sort of a companion to this one, and that video is applying polyvagal theory to heal trauma. I'll put all the resources in the show notes. If you haven't, click on the subscribe bell and subscribe to the YouTube channel, where you can get exclusive content you cannot get on the podcast or anywhere else. If you haven't, subscribe to the podcast, also called Christian Emotional Recovery. Check out the Facebook group, Trauma Survivors Unite Christian Emotional Recovery. Thank you so much for listening. God bless you, and have a great day.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Christian Emotional Recovery, hosted by Rachel Leroy. For links to this week's resources and to join the discussion, check out this episode's show notes at christianemotionalrecovery.com, where you can also find links to our YouTube channel and Facebook group. Join our email list and get other episodes and resources. If you enjoyed the podcast, please rate and review the podcast and tell a friend who may benefit from this message. See you next time. And remember, beloveds, God loves you, and you are fearfully and wonderfully made.